Hello, I'm Mitch Fox, president of the Nevada Broadcasters Association, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Nevada on the Air, a program that highlights the leaders and innovators and out-of-the-box thinkers who are shaking things up and making a big impact in communities throughout the state of Nevada. I'm extremely pleased to have Senator Catherine Cortez Masto on the program today. She's born and raised in Las Vegas. She served 2 terms as Nevada's top prosecutor, and in November 2016, she became the first woman from Nevada ever elected to the United States Senate. During her time as Nevada Attorney General, she became known as a passionate advocate for seniors, for children, and for women, and she sits on 6 Senate committees. We'll find out when she comes up for air in this interview, by the way. And those committee assignments allows her to be an even stronger advocate for Nevada. And we're going to talk about a few of the issues facing Congress on this program. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you, Mitch.
I've looked forward to this for some time. I'm so glad that you have a busy schedule. You find time to do this. Let's talk about affordable housing. Mm-hmm. You know, you hosted a roundtable this week. I saw the testimony that you had with HUD Secretary Ben Carson. And there's folks that are wondering, how do I afford to live when I have a $30,000 a year income?
That's right.
What resources, what recourse do they have?
Yeah, no, so that's been the challenge here in Nevada, both in northern Nevada and southern Nevada, is affordable housing, right? So I sit on Senate Banking and Housing Committee, and this to me is the #1 priority. Our Department of Housing and Urban Development, where Ben Carson is the secretary, this should be the primary focus, because I know in Nevada and across the country, affordable housing is an issue. And when we talk about affordable housing, it is a number of issues. It is housing for what you just said, basically what I call the working poor, right? Those individuals who are struggling, who are trying to work and have a good job and not pay more than 1/3 of their income for housing. It is housing for seniors who are struggling. It's housing for those who low income, that are under the poverty level, that need housing, and homeless. So there's a number of issues we're dealing with. And my goal has been, both in the north and south, and thus the roundtable yesterday, and I did the same thing in northern Nevada, was to bring all the experts together, all of our local governments, and say, all right, how do we address this? Define affordable housing, what you're focused on, and then how do we leverage those resources so that we can take advantage of whatever federal funding and federal incentives are out there, and then make sure we're bringing it here to the needs in Nevada. At the federal level, HUD plays a key role in affordable housing, from low-income tax credits to the home program. These are incentives to address all the affordable housing issues that I just talked about. The challenge we've had is every time the administration introduces or recommends the budget to Congress that they would like to see for their agency, HUD, they zero everything out, from community block grants to home funds to investment tax credit, low-income tax credits, all of that. And so, thank goodness, my colleagues and I, in a bipartisan way, we recognize the need for these programs in our communities, and we are the appropriators, so we put the money back in. So not only did we put money back in to keep these programs going, we increased the funds so that more money is out there. Now, my goal is to make sure that Secretary Carson not only has a vision and understands what affordable housing needs are across the country, but a vision and a plan to make sure this money gets to where it needs to go. So yesterday in the roundtable, I had representatives from HUD who live in our community as part of that discussion, as well as representatives, believe it or not, from the USDA, because a lot of housing funding comes through the Farm Bill, which we're getting ready to talk about, and through USDA for our rural communities that are challenged as well. And my goal is to continue to have those discussions, how we work together in our communities to address these needs.
Let's talk about another issue, and that gun violence.
Yeah.
You know, these incidences this week at the YouTube headquarters, it didn't result in a lot of casualties like prior incidents had, but still it alarmed a lot of people. What is it going to take to get some gun safety measures passed through Congress?
Right now, it's going to take us working together. You know, this idea that somehow a law-abiding gun owner isn't, as opposed to somehow reducing gun violence, is ridiculous, right? I know law-abiding gun owners in this state, they're in my family. My husband and I are law-abiding gun owners, but we also we need to reduce gun violence. We've got to figure this out. We've got to make sure that not only are we saving lives, we're reducing the incidence of future shootings. And to do that, there's common sense things. There is universal background checks to make sure that people that get access to guns that shouldn't have them because they're a criminal or they have a mental illness of some sort or they're a terrorist, they don't get those. We close the private gun show loopholes. We make sure you can't buy a gun on the internet. We look at age appropriate, right? If you're 18, you shouldn't be able, you can't buy a gun, so why should you be able to buy an assault rifle? We look at bump stocks, banning these bump stocks, right? And similar devices that turn a semi-automatic into an automatic. We saw what happened here in this horrific massacre here. Every gun owner that I know and who's a hunter, and like I said, they're in my family and their friends, who uses these bump stocks? Nobody does. And so we need to outlaw those. We need to study. This is the first time in the omnibus bill, we were able to put in there the ability for the CDC to study gun violence so we can figure out how we adopt common sense measures to reduce it and still allow those law-abiding citizens that own guns to still own their guns, who think that we should address this issue in our society. You know, I just was yesterday talking with the Clark County School Police because we were talking about school safety on the heels of all these horrific shootings that we have in our schools, which is outrageous. You know, I went to the public school system here. I never once growing up had concern, right, that there was going to be gun violence. But now these kids, this is what they deal with. So yes, the movement that we've seen with these kids now that are marching on Washington, marching here in Las Vegas and across the country, they're demanding safe schools. They're demanding a reduction of gun violence, and they want us to do something about it. And rightfully so, we should. Now we need to step up. So I'm calling all my colleagues, Democrats, Republicans, Independents in Congress, let's do something about it. Now's the time, and we need to save lives.
You mentioned the omnibus budget bill. There was not a solution for deferred action for childhood arrivals, the DACA program. The president did blame Democrats for not coming up with a solution or not negotiating a solution for that. What is the future of the program? What are there for dreamers right now? What can you tell them?
Yeah, let's put it in perspective. We're here because the president actually terminated the program. So this crisis that we have for our kids and our dreamers that are in our community, and there's over 12,000, almost 13,000 of them, it was created by this president. And there were many opportunities for this president, including during this omnibus bill, to help us protect our dreamers. And every time that the Democrats and some Republicans have come together in a bipartisan way to protect dreamers and compromise and negotiate where we felt we had a bill, it was turned down by this administration. You know, I remember clearly the president sitting around a table saying to my colleagues, and in a bipartisan way, there was representatives there saying, we love these dreamers, we need to protect them. And you bring me a bipartisan bill, and I'll sign it, and I'll take the heat for it. And so what did we do? We got in a room together, we put together a bipartisan bill that addressed dreamer protections and border security, and we introduced it on the floor of the Senate. And the administration came out against it. Their Homeland Security came out against it, and they came up with their own version of a bill, which was basically putting dreamers on a pathway to citizenship in exchange for comprehensive immigration reform beyond what we had negotiated and was not appropriate, that many of us felt. Here's what happened. Both of those bills had a vote. The president's bill only got 39 only 39 votes. Not even all the Republicans supported the president. And when our bill came up, because the president had negative comments and his Homeland Security had negative comments, we needed 60 votes to pass it. We only had 54. That means that, and 8 Republicans supported it. That tells me that because the president was against this bipartisan bill, because Mitch McConnell, who's in leadership, didn't tell his Republican caucus this is something we should get behind and support, it didn't pass. So this hasn't been for lack of trying. The Democrats and some of my Republican colleagues have been working very hard to protect dreamers, and we keep getting blocked by the administration, this White House, and the leadership, Republican leadership in Congress, and it needs to stop. And here's why. Because, Mitch, you know, in our community, these dreamers, they're not criminals. They're not violent criminals. They're not out committing crime. What they are doing is they're out going to school. They're working hard. They want to be a part of our community. They are teachers in our schools because Governor Sandoval has allowed dreamers to teach in the schools. They have open businesses and they're creating jobs, and they contribute economically. That's why the chamber supports them. That's why so many farmers and businesses and cattle ranchers, I mean, you name it, people support dreamers and doing something about it.
Kind of along the same lines is this Department of Commerce, kind of Justice Department getting together and wanting to add a question about citizenship status onto the 2020 census. It's kind of unusual, right? What's
It is unusual. So that question was taken off of the census in the 1950s, and here's why. The concern was that if we use the census to appropriate funds and also to determine representation in Congress, and everybody should be counted. Nobody should have any fear that they are giving information to the government that can be used against them. The concern that we have is by using only citizenship, we are missing out on a number of people who are here legally, who also may be traveling abroad or living or working abroad in our military. We need to make sure we're counting everyone for those federal funds that are necessary, as well as the representation. Without that, that's going to leave our states and local governments underfunded, missing out on money that they need for our population here. That's why it was taken off in the 50s, and it has been left out. And the concern that I have and many of my colleagues have is that underrepresentation and the lack of really identifying the appropriate population for needed funding that comes into our communities. That's why the governor had the same concerns here in Nevada.
Yucca Mountain. Funding wasn't included in the omnibus. That's a victory for the state, a good thing. But still, it almost seems like this is the issue that won't go away, right? So what are the long-term prospects? Is there still that inclination, do you think, among current leaders in Congress that they're going to go ahead with the study of this?
I think there's a few stubborn congressmen, particularly, who just are so bent on wasting these dollars and have no idea really what's out there right now. If you go out to Yucca Mountain, it's nothing but a 5-mile hole in the ground. That's a horseshoe, right? Because we've used it over the last, 30 years to study hydrology and geology to see if the site is safe. And that science has told us the site is not safe. And to go any further, you still have to build and dig 43 miles more, bring the transportation here, along with all the man-made barriers that need to put in place because it's not scientifically safe. That's millions of dollars that'll be wasted. And so my goal and my colleagues in Congress have said, you know what, we need a different tactic here. We need to have consent-based siting. There are places where we can look at addressing this waste and the storage of the waste that states would accept it, that the local stakeholders would accept it. Everybody should. If you're going to put it somewhere in a state, then the state should be a part of that process. The other thing that people don't realize is in Nevada, we are well versed at fighting Yucca Mountain. I don't know of any other state than the state of Nevada and the people that live here that know more about it and have been in this fight longer than people in Congress. I think people in Congress are new, they're getting educated about this, but this has been a concerted effort from our elected leaders and our locals for some time now. And not only do we have the fight at the federal level, as the Attorney General, I have 5 lawsuits going in federal court that are still pending, challenging Yucca Mountain, that still have to work through the process. And then even if we were to even go down this path, we still have to have administrative hearings. And we have over 300 contentions that we have challenged the scientific analysis for this site in the administrative process that has to be reopened. The discovery alone in that would take 3 years. So there is no way that this is going to happen anytime soon, and there is a concerted effort that we have had in united front in the state of Nevada to fight this. So again, this is another boondoggle, a waste of money, and we need to start thinking smart as a country about what we're doing here. Because we do have to do something about the waste. And we have to think about our kids and the future. And there's new technology and new science on how we can break it down or safely store it. And we should be looking at that instead of wasting it on this boondoggle hole in the ground that is not safe, that is just going to be protracted litigation and a fight for years to come.
One last question that has to do with local broadcasters. You know, you and I were looking at an old photo of the Keno station,
I
and
remember.
you were born and raised here, and we were just kind of taking a trip down memory lane and thinking about all the old-time broadcasters and sort of the role of broadcasting, because, you know, when the floods in northern Nevada in 1 October, in your view, the local broadcasters, they really did rally and provide valuable information in times of emergency, right?
Oh, they still do. I mean, local broadcasters are in your communities, your neighbors, your members. You grew up with them. I grew up with local broadcasters in all 3 stations here, and it is true. They're the first thing you turn on when you come home from work. You want to get the news update on what's going on, but also with all the new technology, broadcasters are an integral part of emergency management in our states, helping people know what's happening, what's the latest alert, what from Amber Alert to the programs that you talk about when there's flooding or there's an incident, and the ability to share that information very quickly with our emergency managers across the country to the safety of our neighbors and community members. You know, our local broadcasters are so important. That's why the independence of local broadcasters is key. That's why their ability to be a part of the community that they live in and be telling the story, the truth about it, the transparency of it, and being a part of that is so important for our communities across Nevada and across the country. So I'm a big supporter of local broadcasters.
Senator, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you came.
I am too. Thank you very much.
Will you come back?
I will. Absolutely.
All right, we got a commitment. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.